There we go. So welcome to those in attendance at the remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. You're also reminded to note that we may have members of the public or press observing today's proceedings. Can I ask those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphone and cameras switched off throughout? Members of the local review body leave their cameras on but mute their microphones when not speaking. As the local review body convenes quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the meeting during consideration of any of these reviews. The meeting has been convened in response to the 3 requests for a review of the decision taken by the appointed officer under the Council scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have provided copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. I now ask Ms McBain, Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedure to be followed in conduct of these reviews and to take a roll call of all members present. Ms McBain.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just quickly run through you're all here. So Councillor McCrae.
I'm here.
Councillor Copeland. You're here. Councillor Farquhar.
Yeah.
Councillor Alphonse.
Present.
And Councillor MacDonald.
I'm here.
Thank you.
So am I, but I was muted.
That's okay. I'll just read through the statement now. So members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. I would like to draw the LRB's attention to the following. The first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations, that the regulations governing the local review process requires that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review, that the focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. The circumstances in which additional matters can be taken into account are set out in the legislation and will be addressed by the LRB's advisors where relevant. The review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matters set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms McBain. So turning to consideration of the first review in respect to the decision to refuse the application of the erection of a replacement dwelling house with integrated garage, associated site works and hard standing surface parking at 32 Hillview Crescent, Aberdeen, planning reference 230825. We'll now hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Ms Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder to why the application was refused. I point out Ms Green attends today's meeting to provide us with necessary professional planning guidance because she's not been involved in the consideration of the application under review. Ms Green will not, however, be able to express any view in the merits of proposed development, and in effect, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. That's over to Ms Green.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so this is a request for review against an application refused under delegated powers for the erection of a replacement dwelling at 32 Hillview Crescent, as noted. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit. And the applicant indicated on the notice of review that there were no new matters raised in the submissions. However, there are drawings showing a different proposal included within those submissions. So I'll come back to that at the end of this first section of the presentation and before members decide how they wish to proceed. In terms of procedure, the applicant expressed the view that the review may proceed on the basis of the submitted information. So I'll just provide some background information before handing back. So first of all, site location, 32 Hillview Crescent, just facing Cults Academy site and backing onto this open space, which is a local nature conservation site. And moving on to the site plan, this actually shows the proposed house located on a street of detached houses here. And you can just note on that plan the position of the house on the site roughly in line with other houses on the street in terms of the building line. This is just from Google Maps, showing the existing house here. And then a 3D view from Google. Unfortunately, it's kind of done something funny to the front of the house there. This is Cults Academy in the foreground. And then plans and elevations of the existing house. And it's a 3-bed house with a shallow pitched roof, integral garage. And it has a gable elevation to the street, and it's elevated in render and blockwork of 5 stone type. And also, just to note, there's steps up to the front door there. So the existing driveway slopes up from the street. I think it's about a 1 in 10 gradient. And that's a street view photograph of the house. You just see the driveway up and the steps to the front door. And again, looking west down Hillview Crescent with the house, the existing house here. And this is looking east on this street with the existing house just here. And Cults Academy here on the right. And this is the block plan. I've just enlarged it, so it doesn't show the entire extent of the rear garden. And the house would be on roughly the same footprint, marginally closer to the house on the west and marginally set back further from the street. And the report of handling notes changes to the proposal were, during the course of the application, were that the extent of parking and hard surface to the front were reduced, and the SUDS feature to deal with surface water was indicated here in the front area. And also that the extent of the rear dormer was increased slightly. There's also a bat survey submitted which showed no sign of bats and was accepted, and a design statement which showed photographs of the existing house and the design rationale. Those were with the application. So elevations of the proposed house. And this is obviously based on the plans that were refused permission. So I'll cover what was submitted in the new information a bit later, but these were the plans that were refused planning permission. So it's a proposal for a detached house, floor level of similar height above ground to the existing house. It's a double-storey, 1.5-storey house with traditional type dormers to the front, pitched roof dormers. These are solar panels shown along just below the ridge line, and then the long dormer to the rear. The total footprint of the house would be approximately 139 square metres, and it would be just over 10 metres back to front and roughly 15.5 metres across the frontage. And the height measures approximately 8.3 metres as measured from the front, because obviously there's changes in ground levels. Proposed materials, dry dash render concrete roof tiles and grey alu-clad windows. So just looking at the floor plans, the ground floor plan, integral garage. This is the rear of the house here. And then the 5th bedroom would also be on the ground floor level. Front door with steps up centrally on the elevation. And then the first floor plan, this is the front of the house with the 2 dormers, and the rear with the dormer across there. And a street elevation showing the proposed house here in relation to the neighbours. And then finally, in terms of the plans, have some sections. So that's just showing the rear of the site as the ground rising from the street. And that's just showing the driveway. The gradient won't change for the driveway, it will stay the same. And front of the house, just showing the levels, steps up to the front door. And then moving on to the reasons for refusal, which are summarised here on this slide, obviously stated in full on the decision notice. Firstly, a lack of information in terms of impact on trees, biodiversity, landscaping, energy, emissions reductions that's relating to, and water saving, surface water management, and impact on sunlight reaching neighbouring gardens. Secondly, amenity and overdevelopment. So the scale and positioning of the house and the wall head heights and ridge heights exceeding those of neighbouring properties and those in the area, and also a large roof that would occupy an increased width of the curtilage. Also overlooking of rear gardens from upper floor windows, and overall the scale, form and massing would adversely affect the streetscape and the neighbouring properties, and that the proposal was contrary to policies in National Planning Framework for Policy 14 on design, and then in the LDP Design Policy D1 and H1 Residential Areas Policy, and also H2 Policy on Amenity. And finally, precedent in terms of potentially other developments of a similar nature being approved in the future. So the applicant's case made several points. Firstly, that there's no impact on the existing landscape as the proposed house is built on the same footprint as the existing house. They highlight that there are a variety of house types in the area and the house is not considered to be out of character with surrounding properties. That there's no impact on overshadowing on adjacent properties. That there would be a connection to a combined sewer achievable via a filter trench, and that the applicant also submitted plans for a different proposal, and that's the new information that I was referring to. So I'll just detail what that is on the next slide. So there are several plans and reports submitted, and those are available online. So they were plans showing a house of reduced ridge height above ground level, built at a lower level with the sort of ground to the rear reduced in height. So the house would sit at a lower level. It's a shallower roof pitch. There would be flat roof dormers to the front instead of pitched roof dormers. The dormer to the rear is of a lesser height with the windows positioned slightly differently as a result. There were existing and proposed landscaping plans and a report including a survey of the garden and details of biodiversity. there was a shadow analysis which compared the existing house and the house as proposed within the new information, and there was a drainage layout. So I will hand over to legal in a moment to cover the tests for new information for members to decide whether to take that into account. However, I would mention that the changes shown in the new information that's been submitted with the review would need to be submitted as a fresh application because they couldn't be competently conditioned as they're too significant. So before I hand over to legal, just also to note that the applicant expressed the view that no further procedure is required. However, it would be for members to consider whether they consider that necessary. So I'll just hand over for the next slide.
Hello, convener, members, to you, convener. I'm just going to read out a wee blurb I have about the legal tests. So a new matter is any information or evidence that is not before the planning officer when they made their decision. The legislation is clear that a party can only raise a new matter if the new matter could not have been raised before the decision was made, or that it not being raised before that time was a consequence of exceptional circumstances. It is for the party who wants to raise the new matter in an LRB to explain in their submissions why the new matter meets the criteria above and provide any supporting documents or evidence they have. The LRB should then decide whether to accept or reject the new matter. If the LRB accepts the new matter, it can consider it along with the other information and evidence in the review. If the LRB rejects the new matter, it will not take it into account in the review. I'll now hand back to the LRB for members to have a discussion on whether they are satisfied that they have been provided with the information to conclude that the criteria I've previously mentioned has been met or not. Thank you, convener. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. So I'll quickly go around the room, but at the moment my position would probably be down the lines of the additional information would need to be submitted as a fresh application as we're considering the application that was at the higher height. So I'll just quickly go around the room. Councillor Copeland.
Wait.
Hear me now? I would be rejecting the additional application. I think it makes it two different applications altogether. I think it would need a new application if that was to be taken in. So I'd be rejecting it as part of this application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thacker.
Yeah, same as you, Chair.
Councillor MacDonald.
I'm in agreement with yourself, Chair.
And Councillor Alphonse.
And myself, I agree too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll hand back to Ms. Green.
Well, at this point, I would hand back to you, convener, to decide how to proceed, and with the applicant having expressed the view that the review can proceed without further procedure.
Okay, so we now need to consider we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, reminder, if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request a further written information to be provided, hearings to be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. I feel at the moment we have sufficient information to proceed, but we'll go around the room. Councillor Thacker.
Yeah, I think we've got enough.
Councillor Alphonse.
Yes, I agree too. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
Agree.
Councillor Copeland.
Yes, proceed.
Okay, as we have, or as the committee now feels we have sufficient information, we'll now pass back to Ms. Green, who will take us through the relevant policies and considerations for this review. Ms. Green.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen on the policies now. Okay, so these are the policies that were referred to and are relevant. And I've just highlighted there policy 14 on design, which was part of the reason for refusal, whereas some of the others were mentioned in terms of lack of information. So policies 1, 2 and 3 are overarching and relevant to almost every application. I suppose particular mention was made of the impact on biodiversity of the proposal, although the house is on the same footprint approximately as the existing house. Policy 14 relates to design and is similar to the policies on design in the adopted and proposed plans, which I'll cover in a moment. And policy 16 relates to residential amenity, and I'll cover that in a slide to follow. Policy 22 on water management is relevant in terms of surface water management, and it states that development proposals will manage all rain and surface water through sustainable urban drainage systems, and also that development proposals should seek to minimise the area of impermeable surface. So moving on to look in a bit more detail at some of those policies. Policy 16 talks about the impact on the character and environmental quality of the home and surrounding area, and whether there's a detrimental effect on neighbouring properties in terms of impact, overshadowing and overlooking. And then policy 14 on design, proposals should be designed to improve the quality of the area, whether urban or rural, and also regardless of scale. So moving on to the policies in the local development plan, site lies within an area zoned as residential areas, and it is a residential use. I'll cover that policy in a moment. Policy D1 on design, I'll show you a slide on that in a moment. And policy D2, I also have a slide. The following 4 policies there on natural heritage, amenity and overshadowing, landscape design, and low and zero carbon emissions reduction. Those were all mentioned in terms of a lack of information. And then finally, there's the Aberdeen planning guidance on redevelopment of residential curtilages and on amenity and space standards. And that one looks at how to assess daylight, development layouts, privacy, outlook, etc. And it's expected that new development will not adversely affect daylighting of existing houses. So there's a crossover between the policy D2 amenity, the residential curtilages and amenity. They're all noting daylight and overshadowing. So I'll just cover the residential areas policy. So that notes that within residential areas, proposals for new development will be approved in principle if they do not constitute overdevelopment, they don't have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area, they don't result in the loss of open space, which this one obviously doesn't, and they comply with supplementary guidance. So the main one for that would be the Aberdeen planning guidance on redevelopment of residential curtilages. And obviously, since the application was determined, those planning guidance notes have been approved, so they hold greater weight than at the time of the application. So policy D2 on amenity states that proposals should be designed to make the most of opportunities for views, sunlight through appropriate siting, layout and orientation, should afford occupiers adequate levels of amenity in terms of daylight, sunlight, noise, air quality and outlook. The occupiers should be afforded adequate levels of amenity in relation to, sorry, that's the same point. They should have a public face to the street to ensure natural surveillance and active street frontages. And finally, that there should be minimal shading of external and private and public spaces. So looking at the redevelopment of residential curtilages guidance, new developments must respect the established pattern of development formed by the relationship between buildings and their surrounding spaces. And the scale and massing of new dwellings should complement the scale of existing properties, with the density also reflecting surrounding areas, with no more than 1/3 of the total site area being built upon as a general guide. New developments should not generally project beyond the established building line, and distances between proposed and existing dwellings should be similar to that predominating within the street. And also, probably the most relevant point here, the ridges and wall heads of new dwellings should be no higher than the ridges or wall heads of adjoining dwellings. And then this slide just covers design policy, and this policy covers the same points as in general as the NPF 4 policy 14 on design as well. And overall, high quality design is sought for development proposals with a view to improving the overall quality of an area. So moving on to the evaluation, primacy of the development plan, that being NPF 4 and the Local Development Plan 2023, with all applications being determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and each application being treated on its merits. And then the basis of this decision, obviously it lies within a policy H1 zoning residential areas, and then the impact on the character and amenity of the area. So it's really the points to note are the ridge and wall head heights in terms of how they relate to the neighbouring properties. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan when considered as a whole, or are there material considerations indicating otherwise? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the screen? Not seeing any hands at this time. Just wondering if you could take us back to the slide that showed us the ridgeline of the roof compared to the other properties adjoining it.
Yeah, just one moment.
That's great. And how much higher is it compared to the, do we have measurements to the ridge lines of the other properties?
I don't actually have those here, but there's the scale on the bottom, so I can just roughly look at it. So it looks as if it's just over 1 metre different to the property on the right. It's a bit less than that compared to the property on the left. So that would be be under 1 metre, maybe sort of 800 700 to 800 compared to the property on the left.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Copeland.
Yes, thank you, convener. Can everybody hear me? Huh? Lucy, can you tell us this proposed property is actually not exactly in the same footprint as the existing one? It's moved, as we're looking at, to the left. Is that right? So how far is it? Is it towards the property on the left as opposed to the existing building?
I think it's a very marginal difference, actually. Let me see if I can just, the existing property is also closer to the one on the left. Just, the case officer didn't actually give a measurement, but they did say it was a marginal difference. Hold on, I'll just see if I can pull up the... Yeah, I'm not actually sure I can tell you because the block plan shows the proposed house. Let me see if I can look at it on the mapping system. Just one moment. Okay, that's showing the existing house.
Yeah.
So you can see that distance to the boundary is quite small.
We're
there.
probably speaking inches, are we?
Possibly, yes.
Aye. Okay, thank you. That's fine.
Thank you very much. Any further questions from members? Okay, not seeing any hands at this time. So in accordance with the procedure notice circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations related to the case have been considered and taken into account. So we now move to determination. Looking at the general room, anyone want to make any suggestions? Neil Copeland.
Yes, thank you, convener. I would be inclined to uphold the officer's decision on this one and refuse the application for the reasons stated by the officer.
Thank you very much. I would probably be like-minded in terms of the policies that have been outlined in terms of the masking scaling, especially with the guidance on the ridgeline to the adjacent properties. It seemed to be higher, and the views that we're seeing left and right of the property seem to be that the other properties are at a 1.5 or bungalow, and the ridgelines are quite lower than the current property that's been proposed, but we'll happy taking other members. Councillor Alphonse.
I agree. It seems to be a lot higher. Yeah, so I agree with Councillor Copeland and yourself. Thank you.
Councillor Thacker.
Yeah, I feel much the same. I'm not really like in terms of the biodiversity, I wasn't too worried about that, given it's like a similar footprint, and I wasn't too worried about overshadowing, but just the sticker point, I guess, was the height in comparison to the rest of the street.
And Councillor MacDonald.
I would concur with other members. I think I think we need to take into consideration as well the road. It's not exactly flat, I suppose. It does dip away, and given that consideration as well, I would be inclined. I didn't think it was hugely bigger than the rest, but just enough to cause a precedent in the area, and hopefully that can be looked at in the future.
Thank you very much. Therefore, the local review body has agreed to unanimously uphold the decision of the appointed officer, and the application is therefore refused. Please note a decision notice from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in forthcoming days. Thank you very much. So turning to consideration of the second review in respect to the decision to refuse the application for the change of use from flat to short-term let accommodation with maximum occupancy of 4 people at 23 Ferryhill Terrace, planning reference 230999. We will now hear from Planning Officer and Attendance Ms Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. Just as before, Ms Green sits as an independent chair in this application. Ms Green.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just share my screen. Right, so this is a request for review against refusal of the application under delegated powers for a short-term let at 23 Ferryhill Terrace. Just to mention that sui generis in the description means it's outside the use classes order, and short-term lets fall outside the use classes order as they're not a residential use, nor would they fall into the same class as hotels or hostels. So the applicant has indicated on the notice that there are no new matters included within the review submissions, and in terms of procedure, they're content that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll continue to provide some background information before handing back for members to discuss how to proceed. So this is the location of the site in relation to the wider city. It's just on the corner of Bonaccord Street and Ferryhill Terrace. You see Bonaccord Terrace Gardens there for context, South College Street and Springbank Terrace to the north. Location plan a bit closer. You can see the property here, and it's the ground floor of this property that's in question. And the applicant also owns this rear garden area here. Also to mention is the parking area to the side on the corner there. So the application relates to the ground floor flat, which extends into a single-storey extension, a side extension at ground floor and upper level. And it lies within a controlled parking zone with metered parking, maximum 3 hours stay on Ferryhill Terrace. And in the surrounding area, there's a shop on the corner, Ferryhill Primary School here. I think there's another shop down the other end of Ferryhill Terrace. So just a not very clear overhead aerial photograph showing the property here. That's the side extension and the extent of the property, the corner parking, and that's Ferryhill Terrace. And then street view from Ferryhill Terrace with the property here, and that's the side extension, and Bonaccord Street at the end there. And that's from the corner. The application property here. A bit further around the corner. And this is the ground floor plan of the property. So you would enter through the front door of the property or through the back door. And this is the front door to the ground floor flat with 2 bedrooms, and then this is the shared living space. And this is access to the upper floor, which the applicant has stated would be locked. So yes, as I mentioned, there are 2 bedrooms with living space. The applicant advised that the maximum occupancy is 4 people with a minimum stay of 2 nights. It would be a short-term let on a permanent basis. Check-in would be after 3 p.m. with check-out before 10 a.m. The property shares an entrance with 2 other properties. There is dedicated off-street parking on that corner area. There would be access to the rear yard garden area, and there are no amenities in it, however. Access would be via a smart lock system, allowing access by an app for a temporary period. That's the first floor plan, which was included in the application drawings. As I mentioned, the applicant stated that the room would be closed off with a code lock door. That it wouldn't be possible to control that within the application, though. Reasons for decision. Impact on the character of the building and the neighbourhood. Impact on the amenity of the neighbouring properties within the building due to the intensification of use beyond permanent mainstream residential use, with resultant increase in comings and goings at more unusual hours, potentially, with a higher number of occupants than as a mainstream residential use, meaning more noise and social activities of a greater intensity. Also, impact on security within the shared internal spaces, and making the point that less than half of the residents within the building would be permanent residents, potentially, that it would be contrary to policy H1, the residential areas policy, and despite the likely local economic benefits, the impact on local amenity would outweigh this. And also that it would be contrary to policy 30 on tourism in NPF 4. So for the applicant's case, there would be overall disagreement that there's a significant adverse impact on the residential building. They consider that the impact would be negligible. The property is on a busy junction with traffic on foot and vehicle and going to the school. There's a shop opposite with 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. openings, and there'd be comings and goings associated with that. There are a number of guest houses and hotels in proximity. The social space in the property would be not below or adjacent to the other residents. They state that the usable space is 52 square metres rather than 88 square metres due to the locking off of the upstairs bedroom and the type of space. That the 35 square metres of social space would be provided, not 78 square metres. And again, that's because of the locking off of the upper space in the side extension. They point out that entrance to the flat doesn't involve passing the front doors of the other flats within the building. That previously the flat was a 3-bed family rental, and that the proposal would reduce the numbers occupying the ground floor. The renovation to a high level has taken place, and that there have been no complaints about noise by other residents during the family's occupation of the property. I would also point out, in terms of consultations, that there was no objection from the roads team. The property is within a controlled parking zone and would be entitled to apply for 2 permits. There's 1 dedicated off-street space for the property. In terms of waste, there was no objection from the waste team. Environmental Health had no objection, and Ferry Hill Community Council, no response received. There were 6 objections citing parking pressure, parties and noise potential. Standards of behaviour were mentioned in terms of the quiet neighbourhood, and that it was stated that there were too many short-term lets in the neighbourhood. So at that point, I'll hand back to you, convener, to decide how to proceed, and the applicant expressed the view that no further procedure was required.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So we now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, remind if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request further written information be provided, hearings, or arrange a site visit to be undertaken. At this moment, I feel we have sufficient information to proceed, but if we go around the room, Councillor Thacker.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Councillor MacDonald.
Agreed.
Councillor Copeland.
Agreed.
Councillor Alphonse.
Agreed.
Thank you. As members feel we have sufficient information, we'll now pass back to Ms. Green, who will guide us through the relevant policies and considerations for us review. Ms. Green.
Thanks. Just one moment and I'll share the slides again. So moving on to policies. Again, policies, this is National Planning Framework policies, and policies 1, 2 and 3 are relevant to all applications, but probably of limited relevance in this particular case for a change of use. Policy 12 supports the reuse of existing buildings and covers waste management from residential buildings. Policy 13 covers sustainable transport, public transport and active travel. And policy 30 was used by the case officer as the basis for refusal. And so I'll cover that in more detail on the next slide. So this is policy 30, and it states that development proposals for new or extended tourist facilities would be supported. Then criteria B, tourism related development would take into account contribution to the local economy, compatibility with the surrounding area in terms of the nature and scale of activities and the impacts of increased visitors, the impacts on communities in terms of provision of homes and services for local people, the opportunities for sustainable travel to the site, access for disabled people, measures to minimise carbon emissions, opportunities to provide access to the natural environment, and probably the most relevant ones. So proposals for the reuse of existing buildings for short-term lets would not be supported where the proposal would result in unacceptable impact on local amenity or the character of the neighbourhood, or the loss of residential accommodation where the loss is not outweighed by local economic benefits. So moving on to the policies in the local development plan, the sites in an area zoned within a residential area. I'll have a look at that policy in a bit more detail on the next slide, together with the policy on tourism and culture BC2. So in terms of the others, policy R5 states that developments must ensure provision of refuse storage facilities, and T2 requires that developments must be accessible by sustainable means of transport. Policy 3 relates to appropriate levels of parking, and just to note that the roads team commented that the proposed use would not have a different impact on parking to the existing residential use. So looking at a bit more detail at the residential areas policy, within existing residential areas, proposals for non-residential uses will be supported if they are complementary to residential use and the use would not cause conflict with or nuisance to the enjoyment of existing residential amenity. And then VC2, proposals for new facilities capable of strengthening the appeal of the city to a wider range of visitors would be supported. They should be sequentially located in the city centre or on sites allocated for that use, unless activity and locational specific issues demonstrate that that's impractical. So the Scottish Government produced publication on short-term lets, noting that they make an important contribution to the tourist economy, providing a unique tourist experience, offering accommodation in places not served by hotels and hostels, offering affordable accommodation for people on lower budgets, and also increasing the capacity of accommodation for particular events. And there was also research finding that the most common positive impact of short-term lets is the local economic impact. And then there's also the circular on short-term lets and planning, and it refers to policy 30 that we looked at earlier. It notes that the short-term lets should be balanced against wider policy objectives in the plan, and it also covers planning authorities being able to grant for limited time periods. So in terms of evaluation, the primacy of the development plan, that being NPF4 and the local development plan, with all applications being determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, and each application treated on its merits. So for this particular case, the basis of the decision would be the impact on amenity, the appropriateness of the location for short-term lets, and the impact on the local economy, obviously balancing those issues against each other. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan, or are there material considerations that would indicate otherwise? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Any questions? Councillor Copeland.
So, Ms. Green, could you go back to the actual picture of the premises, please? Showing the actual premises.
The street view picture?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just one moment.
Yeah, thank you. It wasn't really clear to me what was said, but I take it that black door.
Sorry.
Sorry, go back to that one with the black door.
Yeah.
Is that the only access for that building? So the ground floor flat, you go in that door, the flat would be on your right, and the other two flats, I take it, are upstairs with a common lobby, or have they got an access somewhere else?
No, they access through that front door, and there's also a back door. So, but both can all the flats can access through the front or back doors.
All right, because I mean the picture that was shown said this is the access door. I take it that's the internal door once you go through that one. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
No, I just wanted that clarified. Thank you.
Thank you. With returns to the parking situation, I understand there's been a number of representations in regards to that, but it seems to be 2 parking spaces attached to the side of the extension. Is that for the exclusive use of the flat, or is that for everyone within that 3 flats that are in that block?
It notes that there's 1 space associated with this particular flat, and then there's 2 other spaces which I assume would be for the rest of the building. So 1 space in that area.
Okay, thank you. Any Councillor MacDonald?
Yeah, I'm not entirely clear about this extra room, a space that is blocked off by a code. So is that's on the first floor? Is that when we saw that front picture that Councillor Copeland asked for? Is that the one with the window open, or does that belong to the flat in the middle floor, and then there would be an upper floor? Is there are there 3 flats in that house?
Yes, just I can show show the picture again. Just one moment. I don't think it was the open window. So this, the upper floor in the side extension would be this window on the side. So that window that's open would be another flat.
I understand now. Yeah, I was thinking it was part of the main building rather than being the upstairs of that extension. But that's clear to me now where it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Okay. I think of any off the top of my head, but I don't think I've got any more. So in terms of the procedural notes circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations related to the case have been considered and taken into account. Determination members. I have concerns with that sort of second space upstairs, Councillor MacDonald. I understand that it would be locked off by a key, or the applicant said it would be locked off by a key code. But as Ms Green has outlined, I think it'd be very difficult to control that, and would that at a later time be opened up as an additional third bedroom, which then opens up your occupancy to 6. So I do have a concern with that. I don't know if you want to come in on that, Councillor.
I do, and it does appear to me as well that as a property for a family, as it was before, it worked very well as a rental, and I do have concerns about that extra space and the potential as well for that to be used inadvertently without knowledge.
Ms Green, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I thought it might be just helpful to mention that although that, the control to that space couldn't be conditioned, I would advise the license and the planning permission on the basis of the occupancy being 4 people. So they would have to apply again if it was to increase. That was all.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Any other councillor?
Convener, could I just make the point then, though, that there could still be 4 people and all 3 bedrooms could be used, although there was only 4 people pitched up to rent the property for however long, I would have thought.
Yep, I entirely take that point. I guess you could have a single and a single over the space of the entirety, but yeah, it'd be very difficult for us to sort of control that unless somebody was to then come back and highlight the fact that that room is being used, but it's a very difficult one for us to sort of control. But I do highlight the point with that as well. Anyone else wish to enter? Not seeing any further hands at this point. I'm minded to uphold the officer's recommendations on this. I know there's a number of, in terms of the additional supplementation in terms of short-term lets, there's a number of hotels and local B&Bs within that vicinity as well. So would that add anything additional to the area? I mean, I'm not entirely convinced. I don't know how other members feel on this one. Councillor Copeland.
I understand your concerns, but I think the opposite. Quite frankly, I don't think it conflicts with policy on amenity. And the place there's, as you said yourself, there's lots of letted properties in the area. There is a lot of footfall in that area as well. It's very adjacent to the city centre, and I suppose it is concerning that a family residential property has been taken out for a short-term let. I can understand that, but I don't see the conflict with the existing policies. So on that basis, I would be inclined to grant it, although I do understand the concerns about the 3rd bedroom.
Thank you very much, Councillor Copeland. Councillor Florence.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Copeland as well. I don't think it stands out. I think there's, I think, you know, there's no objection from Rose. There is one parking space. I would imagine a family probably would rent it. I think it would be one car. I don't think it would add any extra traffic. So I do have concerns about the room, but I agree with Councillor Copeland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thacker.
I can see both sides, so I feel like it's quite hard to come down. I think on balance, I'm probably leaning towards your position, Councillor McCrae. Just in terms of, I feel like the area's got a lot of hotel and B&B options. So I'm not convinced it'll add a great deal there. Whereas in terms of yeah, I just think I'm leaning that way at the moment, but happy to hear other contributions.
Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, I think I would be upholding the officer's recommendations on this one, just in terms of the H1 and tourism policies, and I'm not so concerned about the parking, although I do find that parking on the corner there rather a bit of a one-off, but it's been there for a while, I guess, and not really for consideration. So I'm not so concerned about parking for local residents, but I do think that on balance, and it is a difficult one, I think, on balance, I would be upholding the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. Therefore, the local review body has agreed by majority to uphold the decision of the appointed officer. Therefore, the application has now been refused. Please note that the decision notice will be sent out to the planning. Sorry, I've lost my word in there, but yeah, the decision notice will be sent out in the next coming days for the decision of the LN. Can we take a 5-minute recess? There seems to be a problem with the lights in the townhouse at the moment, so you could try and figure out what's going on, if that's acceptable to everyone.
Very acceptable, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll just get everyone back online again. Okay, we are all back again. Okay, so turning to consideration of the third review in respect to a decision to refuse the application for the erection of a single-storey link extension and 1.5-storey extension with integral garage to the front at Hillview, Skene Road, Aberdeen, planning reference 230723. We'll again hear from planning advisor and tenants Ms Green, who will take us through the brief description of the planning proposal and remind of the reasons why the application is refused. Again, Ms Green attends today to provide the necessary planning guidance because she's not been involved in the earlier process, and her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms Green.
Thank you, convener. I'll just share my slides. Okay, so as you mentioned, this is a request for review against an application refused under delegated powers for the single-storey extension at Hillview. And the review was submitted within the necessary time period following the decision, and the applicant indicated that there are no new matters within the submissions. And in terms of procedure, the applicant expressed the view that the review should not proceed on the basis of the information submitted, and there should be a site visit to allow members to view the site context. However, I will continue and provide some background information before handing back for a decision from members on that. So looking at the site location, the application relates to this house in the Greenbelt, near the Aberdeen Western Peripheral Route at King's Wells, and it's near the junction that's between King's Wells and West Hill. So I should probably point out access at this. It's off the, so this is the leg going to West Hill. Access is down this this road here, and then the driveway off the road. You can see it there, and then that's the driveway to the house. So aerial photograph the house there. So this road continues southward, and I have a street view photograph from that road looking towards the dwelling there, and you can see West Hill in the background just there, and then the A944. So this is the existing and proposed plans. This is the existing house. It's actually the original house would be that section, and then these are all incremental extensions that have been added, and it has a detached garage. And then the proposal, the original house sits there. That's just a patio to the front, but you can see where the outline of the existing in the red here. And then this is the link extension and the main extension, with this section being a garage. And then the existing garage would be demolished. So these are plans as existing and as proposed. So this is the existing ground floor plan, original house with its extensions around the edge. And then, so the original house sort of remains with what they call a link extension, and then the main extension to the south. And that's the roof plan, and the roof plan of the existing house. So the extension would provide 2 bedrooms as per the existing house, and then there'd be living spaces in the existing cottage from the integral garage. And the overall length of the extension would be 17.4 metres beyond the original house. So these are the elevations as proposed on the left there and as existing on the right. So that's the north elevation, which faces towards the A944. As proposed, obviously this extension would be removed. So you're seeing that original elevation. Well, with the windows are full height under the proposal. And then the south elevation, this is the extension. And that's the existing south elevation with the original house and the various additions. And then the proposed side elevation and existing side elevation. So this would be facing east towards that, the view that I showed before from the minor road. You would see the garage and the length of the extension, and that's the existing situation. And then the west elevations, it's the original house, and then the extension. And the ground rises towards the south. And that's the existing west elevation. And these are just cross sections through the extension, so through the bedroom section and then through the double garage. And this is through the link, cross section through the link section. And then an image of the proposal showing timber cladding. Obviously that's the original house and then the extension from the east side. So the reason for refusal was that the proposed extension would not be small scale or subordinate to the existing house, with its footprint and orientation being such that it would dominate the house in scale and massing, and it would be contrary to the exceptions within the Greenbelt policy in the local development plan and the policy outcome of Greenbelt policy within the national planning framework, which seeks to protect the character, landscape, natural setting and identity of settlements. And it would also be contrary to the requirements of householder development within policy 16 of NPF 4, and it would diminish the amenity of the dwelling house by building over a large part of the rear garden, contrary to the requirements of policy D1 on design, D2 on amenity, and policy 14 on design in NPF 4. So for the appellant's case, the applicant's case, they state that the proposal is appropriate, it's small scale and subordinate to the original house, that poor quality extensions would be removed and that those engulf the original cottage, that the cottage would be reinstated as the main element, and it would be the view of that on arrival that you would see. The ridge heights of the extension would be lower than the original house, with the link separating the two, that the existing floor area is 121 square metres, that's the house and various additions, and that the proposal would only add 32 square metres to that, that it does not exceed the levels in the supplementary guidance, now called the Aberdeen Planning Guidance, as the built footprint would not exceed twice that of the original. I think that's because of debate over what was the original house, whether there were additions that were quite old and would count as part of that. So that's not known. Materials would contrast with the original and are inspired by the local vernacular. In terms of building over the curtilage, the area to the south is the only space available to extend. And they state that the patio to the north would maximise views and the garden to the south and west would make use of sunlight. So they state that the site is 764 square metres, with the proposed cottage being 200 square metres. Overall, the rear curtilage is 418, with the proposed footprint being 118 square metres. So less than 50% of the front or rear curtilage would remain as per the guidance. A couple of further points are that the design would be well ordered, the new openings would allow for natural surveillance of light, and that the new entrance would be via the link and it would be welcoming and attractive. So in terms of consultations, the Health and Safety Executive did not advise on safety grounds against granting of permission. In terms of the Shell pipeline, there was no objection, and also there was no comment received from the Community Council, and there were no representations. So at that point, I'll hand back to members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you very much, Ms. Green. So we now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, reminder, if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request a further written information to be provided here to be arranged or a site visit to be undertaken. At the moment, I feel we have enough information to proceed, but I'll quickly go around the room. Councillor Alphonse.
Yes, I agree. I think we've got enough information. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thacker.
Yeah, agreed.
Councillor Copeland.
Yes, I'm quite happy to proceed, but there's a note in the chat. Could maybe somebody clarify that?
I think that's a note from the applicant or agent, but I don't think we're able to take that into consideration at this time. I'm happy to go back to legal if you wish, Councillor Copeland, just to clarify.
I'm happy to proceed with what we've got in front of us. I just wondered what that was about.
Yeah, I think that's what it's about. But we'll pass over to Councillor MacDonald.
Happy to proceed.
Thank you very much. Just for information to those who are observing, unfortunately, you can't actually enter into any of the discussions or into any of the conversations that are happening with the LRB. This is just for a discussion for the LRB members and officers present. Sorry about that. So therefore, we have sufficient information to take a decision. So we'll hand back to Ms. Green to take us through the relevant policies and procedures.
Yes, thank you. I am happy to just double check the elevations that we have on the website to make sure that I have picked up the correct ones, if you would give me a moment to do that.
Yep, absolutely, Ms. Green.
Just a moment. Yes, I think that some of the elevations have been superseded. So if you would, we could maybe take a 5-minute recess. I can pull up the correct plans. Apologies for that.
Yeah, that's fine. If we take a quick recess to 25 past, are members happy with that? Yes. Thank you. We'll see you at 12:25. Ms. Green, I'm just checking if you're happy to proceed. I think Miss Green might have dropped off the call, so we'll just give her a few minutes to see if she's coming back online again. Welcome back, Miss Green. Are you happy to proceed?
Yes, I've clarified the difference. So I'll show you it's the elevations that I showed you the superseded version rather than the proposed one. So just to highlight that this isn't new information. It's these are the plans that were used to determine the application. So I'll just share my screen. I'm just going to show you straight off the website. Okay, so these are the elevations. I'll just zoom in on them. So this is the east elevation from the from the direction of the AWPR and the minor road. That's the link and the two elements. The difference was that the roof had changed. So there was a different shape to the roof on the previous proposal. That's the section through the link. And this is from the south. And from the west.
Thank you very much for looking those out for us. Are members still happy to proceed to the next stage? Doing lots of nodding and agreeing.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Ms. Green, to take us through the policies and relevant information.
Yeah, I'll just open my presentation again. Okay, so these are the relevant policies from National Planning Framework 4. So policies 1, 2 and 3, as I've mentioned before, are overarching and relevant to almost every application. Policy, I'll come back to policy 8 on green belts. Policy 14 on design is similar to the policies on design in the adopted plan, and I'll cover that a bit later. Policy 16 covers quality homes, and there's some elements covering householder development, which I'll cover in a moment. And policy 23 includes, is of relevance in terms of pipelines, which are nearby, and we've seen that there are no objections in terms of the pipelines. So having a look at Greenbelt policy. First of all, the policy outcome in NPF4, so that development is directed to the right locations with urban density increased and unsustainable growth prevented. But the more relevant one is the character, landscape and natural setting and identity of settlements is protected and enhanced. And then development proposals within the Greenbelt, designated within the LDP will only be supported if they are for, and there are various exceptions, and one of those is intensification of established uses, including extensions to existing buildings where that is ancillary to the main use. So in terms of policy 16, point G, householder development proposals will be supported where they don't have a detrimental impact on the character and environmental quality of the home and surrounding area in terms of size, design and materials. And secondly, do not have a detrimental effect on the neighbouring properties in terms of physical impact, overshadowing and overlooking. And also design policy 14, development proposals will be designed to improve the quality of an area, whether in urban or rural locations and regardless of scale. And then moving on to policies in the LDP, sites zoned within the Greenbelt, so that policy any1 is relevant. Any 3 relates to natural heritage, and there was a bat survey submitted which confirms no sign of bats. Policy D1 I'll cover in a moment. D2 relates to levels of amenity for existing residents, things like amenity space, so the garden space would be relevant in this case. Policy D4 relates to the impact on the character of the surrounding landscape. Policy T3 relates to parking, and the maximum guideline would be 2 spaces for a 2-bed house in the outer city. Policy B6 relates to pipelines, and as I noted, there were no objections on that basis. And also of relevance are the Aberdeen planning guidance on householder development and transport and accessibility. So looking at Greenbelt policy within the LDP, general presumption against development with various exceptions, and then point D is relevant, so this exception is where the proposal is associated with existing activities in the Greenbelt within the boundary of that activity, is small scale, does not significantly increase the intensity of the activity, and the built construction would be subordinate to what already exists, including extensions to existing dwellings. So moving on to policy D2. As I mentioned, that ensures provision of amenity with development designed to take into account views, sunlight, daylight, noise and outlook, natural surveillance, privacy, internal and external amenity space. And it's that external amenity space that was noted in the reasons for refusal. And policy D4 on landscape highlights the impact on the sort of wider landscape and the elements that contribute to the sense of place in that particular area. Now, in terms of the household guidance, there are various general principles in there, with extensions should be architecturally compatible in design and scale. Materials should be complementary. Extension should not overwhelm or dominate the original. In terms of height, mass and scale, there should be no extension or alteration which could result in a situation where amenity of neighbours is affected. The built footprint should not exceed twice that of the original, and no more than 50% of the front or rear curtilage should be covered by development. So moving on to design policy, and also bearing in mind that policy 14 of NPF 4 is similar. High quality design is sought for development proposals with a view to improving the overall quality of the area. And the policy recognises that not all development will be of a scale that makes a significant placemaking impact, but recognises that good design and detail adds to the attractiveness of the built environment. So in terms of evaluation, the primacy of the development plan, that being NPF 4 and the local development plan, and the Planning Act requires all applications to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, with each application treated on its merits. So the basis for the decision would be the zoning policy, any one on the Greenbelt. Is the scale of the proposal subordinate to what exists, especially as seen from the east? And how would it affect landscape character and the amenity of the area, including the amenity of the occupiers in terms of garden space, and also of relevance, the policies on landscape amenity and design, and the NPF 4 policies on Greenbelt design and quality homes. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan when considered as a whole, or other material considerations indicating otherwise? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any members have questions from the screen? Councillor Thacker.
Hi, just to ask, were there any objections at all?
No, there weren't.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alphonse.
Thank you, convener. Hi, Lucy. I take it that, you know, with the demolition of the old outdated extensions, that the new build will be a thermopassive house.
It does have the solar panels on the roof. I mean, if the application were to be approved, there could be a condition attached about carbon reduction equipment, just to clarify that point.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Copeland, as I said, you've got a question.
Thank you, convener. Ms. Green, would it be possible to get back to the picture of the actual site, please? I'm looking to see the actual where it sits in relation to everything else.
The one from Street View, do you mean?
Yes, it's the actual site itself. No, it's away back for the road, but I want to see the footprint of the actual area where it sits in. Yes.
Was it that one?
Yeah, I think it might. Is there another one? Or is that it?
Let me see. That one.
Yes, that's the one I'm looking for. Now, being a bit silly, but if we go, now that I've seen that, let's go back to that previous picture, please. Right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, this flat roof section here is coming off, yes? And
yes,
this bit
that's
here
the
is coming off as well.
This flat roof section's coming off, yes, and this one.
Yeah. And there's one at the other side coming off as well.
Yes.
Or is that it there?
That's the rear extension.
The one the other side's coming off.
Yeah, and that's the garage.
The proposed extension is going there or there?
Yes, it would extend back in here.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fine, to clarify that. So the view from the road, you'd basically be behind this wall, basically, be over here.
Yeah, you'd see the extension. Some of it would be below that wall, extending back, and it's at a height of just below the ridge, so would extend back.
But the whole thing would be within this walled area. There's no encroachment into the fields or anything. It's all within this walled area. Yes.
It's all within the plot.
Yeah. Smashing, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Copeland. Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, that was partly my question as well. That particular photograph was because one of the reasons was from the east. It would be very different to what it is now from the road, presumably, because there's nothing really between the road and the building itself. And I just wonder that shed is going right at the back, I take it, which would have garden implements in it or whatever's in it. People keep in their sheds, but that is going as well as the garage and the extensions. Is that correct?
I mean, it's not shown on the plans. I would assume it's going, but it's not actually
because there's
indicated.
A turning area.
Oh yes, there is. It is indicated. It is indicated as going actually on the layout plan, but it's not within the area of the extension. I can just show you the layout plan. Yeah, it's there. So it's in the corner.
So the amenity that was discussed, so that garden bit to the west would still be available, although they would indicate it would be quite difficult to get round to that area, would it? Or is there going to be a door or you can get round from the patio?
You would be able to get it into it from the house or the patio, I imagine. From the house, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Just in relation to that slide you just showed us, Miss Green, can we go back to the aerial picture again, just to have a look at that?
Yeah. Just go back through them. There, that one.
Thank you. Just in terms of the track that comes up to the property, obviously there's a little T-junction there and then contains London AWPR. Is that a service road or does that go to any other adjoining properties, do we know?
This track, I believe, goes to one further property. This road here.
Okay, thank you. How close is that property, or is that quite a while off down that track?
I can just go to the Google view. Let's take off 3D for a minute. So that's the property. Okay, this seems to be something there. And then this Must be the house mentioned.
That's fine. So it seems to be a substantial distance to anything really else along that track. That's fine.
Yeah, something there.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Alphonse.
Thank you, convener. That other property, just looking at that slide, that shares the same track. Beyond that, that's industrial, obviously. That blue and white coloured building that we're seeing
Yeah.
just there. Yeah, that's
Yes, I think so.
that's industrial. Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Alison.
Yeah.
Looks like there's a,
Excellent. Yes.
looks like there's a house there.
Yes. Yeah. And then further on is the applicant.
Yes, up there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any further questions from members? Not seeing any hands. Okay. So in accordance with the procedure note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations related to the case have now been considered and taken into account. Determination members. I'm just minded in terms of the policies that we've seen, quite a lot of policies that this sort of doesn't quite sit in with and can maybe be argued in terms of any one in terms of Greebelt and subordinate building. Obviously the extension is quite large in terms of the house, but then is that offset by the fact that we're not really anything else residential within the immediate vicinity of the property, and the rest of the properties around it are quite industrial. So, you know, how do we weigh that up? In terms of policy 14D1, in terms of design, quite comfortable with the plans that we've seen within regards to that one, which then ties into policy 16, equality homes, in terms of size and design. I don't think G2 really comes into it in terms of overlooking in terms of the neighbouring properties because of the distances towards what's around it. So I'm quite comfortable with that. Where really it's coming down to the NE1 in terms of Greenbelt, in terms of subordinate sizing to the plot of land it's in. But I'm happy to be guided by members on this. Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, I took note that there is that kind of debate about when those extensions were added, the garage and so on. I actually thought that the design was fairly distinctive, and that, you know, that would be helpful in terms of the design element. Although, you know, and having read the stuff on the website as well, I thought, you know, given the cartilage, that it was fairly resource efficient in terms of land, because there isn't an awful lot of ways to go. I think there is a slight concern about external amenity space, but you know, given that quite a lot of it is taken up by the new extension, but there's no overlooking. I just felt at the end of the day, on balance, given that to the east, where there will be the biggest impact of the cottage, and then the two the bedrooms, and then the garage, that you know, it's the AWPR is where you look down on it, and actually it might look quite good. So, to be honest, convener, I was coming down on the side of overturning the officer recommendations, and maybe if there's a condition around what Councillor Alphonse said about carbon reduction, or anything else that other members might want to chip in, that's kind of where I'm going.
Thank you very much, Councillor Alphonse.
I agree totally with Councillor MacDonald. Hasn't got any neighbours. It's looking onto the WPR. A lot of people don't want a huge garden. So, you know, and I think there's adequate garden space there still available. So, and I agree, I think it'll benefit the area. I think the design looks great. wonderful that they're using solar. You know, I also like the timber cladding, so that's eco. I'm happy with that. And I agree. I'm happy to overturn the officer's recommendations on this house. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thacker.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. I think it's a really high quality proposal. I think it'll really improve what's there existing. I think, you know, older houses that have kind of older kind of poor quality extensions on multiple sides are usually terrible in terms of energy efficiency. So I think there'll be a huge improvement in terms of that. I think the design is nice. I think it's not overly large. It still remains a 2-bed. It's only 30 odd meters squared larger, which isn't really, you know, a great deal, especially considering it's on a very generous plot. So yeah, I'd be happy to overturn council officer's recommendations here.
Thank you very much. Councillor Copeland. Well, I'm certainly not going to argue with anybody else with this one. On first sight, you think there's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't give this, but when you delve down deep into it and look at it with sort of sensible hat on, you see that it's probably on balance got more going for it than it has against it. And as Councillor Alphonse and Councillor MacDonald have both said, if the environmental friendly materials and blending in with the wood and the solar, it's going to make an old inefficient house into probably a very efficient house going forward. And you look at the surrounding areas, it said there's nobody directly overlooking it. The other properties round about, you could say, are of industrial nature, working farms and such like. I can actually see no reason to say no to this, quite frankly. And on balance, I think the yeses outweigh the noes, so I'd be supporting it to overturn the officers and grant this.
Thank you very much. So just in terms of the policies that we're looking at here, in terms of any one green belt and subordinate to the property, are we quite content that to go ahead? Thank you very much. Ms. Green, just in terms of the condition, in terms of carbon reduction.
Yeah.
So Councillor Alphonse, just in terms of what you discussed here in terms of carbon reduction, in terms of the condition, are you happy for that, for further information to be submitted before anything goes ahead?
No, I'm just happy with it how it is actually. I think we're happy. They've got the solar on the roof. I'm happy with the timber cladding. You know, it'll be new windows, you know, that are you know, the proper standard. So no, I don't have a problem. I'm happy with what they've put forward in the plans. Thank you.
Okay, so no conditions to be applied as well. Is there anything else?
I don't think it's necessary.
Could I perhaps ask Ms. Green just to give me a bit of comfort in terms of what condition would be considered in order to make what we aspire to have in terms of a building actually conditioned, and if it's an onerous condition, please let us know.
Well, I've noted that the carbon emissions reductions measures appear to be there, but we could put a condition on that just confirmed the details. Same with the materials, surface water, and I suppose the other one I might mention is landscaping, if you wanted to see any landscape planting there.
I'm content with no landscape planting and things like that. I think it's okay where it is at the moment, but I think if further detail was to be submitted in terms of the energy efficiency and things like that of the house, that'd make me more comfortable.
And I would include materials just to enhance that you know, modern but energy efficient use of the space.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Members all happy?
Yes.
Okay, thanks very much. Therefore, the local review body has agreed to overturn the decision of the appointed officer. We have now considered the planning conditions with that as well, which will be attached to approval of the application. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of today's LRB. Thank you very much for all members for attending and for all the adjournments that have taken place. And we will see you at the next planning committee. Thanks very much.
Thank you.